Misdiagnosed TLC. I'm Laura.
And I'm Jay.
And we are so excited today to have Brooke on with us. Hi, Brooke.
Hi.
And Brooke, would you mind telling everybody, what are you in this transplant world?
I'm me. I received a liver transplant almost 16 years ago, June 24th, 2005. So I am now 36. I was 20 at the time. And my life has changed a lot in the past 16 years, for sure.
Sure. I can't wait to hear about it. So can you tell us, what was your diagnosis that led to the liver transplant?
So I was kind of a typical healthy college student. At 20, I was finishing my sophomore year of college, and I just started feeling like really worn out. I attributed that to like kind of the non-sleep into finals, like push that everyone feels. Like I just was tired, staying up all night, getting ready for school, getting ready for like summer break, you know? And I went home to see my family, and my mother, who loves to remind me that she always knows best, she was like, you don't look like yourself. You're not acting like you're well. Why don't you just go for a checkup while you're home? I was like, okay, fine, Mom, let's do it. And I went in for a checkup, and I mean, I had been healthy my whole life. I had never even, to my knowledge, had blood drawn before. So this to me was like, I mean, they want to draw blood. What are they going to do with that? And I thought that was like the worst part of the thing. Like, oh my gosh, they're going to draw my blood. This is horrible. And so they told me they'd call me like in a week with some test results. And I was awakened with a phone call the next morning saying I needed to come in for more testing. Turns out that my liver functions were like through the roof bad. So like all of my liver tests were really high, and my liver wasn't working properly. And they wanted to figure out what was going on. So ended up with a diagnosis of autoimmune hepatitis. And that happened really fast.
Yeah. Wow. So that's a whirlwind. So you have to go in and get these other tests done. When was the idea of a transplant brought up to you? I'm assuming you went and saw a hepatologist and, kind of had to go through that process.
Well, at that point, they hadn't even, like, they really just thought, because a healthy liver can regenerate. And to my knowledge, it was just an autoimmune disorder at the time. They were like, go home, rest, take it easy for a few weeks, and your liver should regenerate and you should be fine. So I did that, went all the way back to college, which was 6 hours from home, and just kept feeling worse. Ended up going to the emergency room one night, and they put me into the ICU.
Wow.
And that's the first time we started talking about looking for a transplant center, seeing a hepatologist, all of that. So
at that point, did you go home? Where was home at the time?
Home was Mississippi.
Okay.
College was Tennessee. And the transplant center we ended up at was in New Orleans. So all over the South.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a whirlwind. Imagine being just, like a normal 20-something college kid, totally healthy. And then all of a sudden you're in ICU and you're like, but I don't understand what's going on. Like, just, regular people like us just don't know, like, what a transplant is. We don't understand the functions of our internal organs. I was like, what does my liver do again? Didn't know where it was located in my body. It was kind of a wild ride. And the hospital I was at in Tennessee was kind of a small town hospital.
Okay.
And they didn't really know what to do with me. So I actually got flown by hospital jet to New Orleans because they said I wasn't stable enough to go in an ambulance. They didn't think I would make it. And when I got to New Orleans, I came in, they put me straight into ICU. And then when the doctors looked at my chart and then looked at me, I mean, they kind of did the back and forth thing, like with a confused look on their face. My medical records and my labs didn't match what they were seeing because I was alert and energetic like I normally am, and just like, hey, why am I in ICU? I need some answers. And they're like, we thought you were going to come in a coma. Like everything points to the fact that you should not be awake at all right now. I was like, well, I'm not in a coma. So what are we going to do?
Yeah, unfortunately, we hear that quite a bit. Doing this show, we hear people being misdiagnosed at first quite a bit, right? And then,
Yeah.
I personally can attest to that myself in my case, but we hear that over and over again, and until it's, just sneaks up on you, and then you probably wonder, you're in the ICU, you wonder, how did I get here, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like an out of body experience in a lot of cases. It catches, it just blindsides you. So.
Yeah, it felt like that. And I can't even imagine how it felt to my parents, to have a healthy kid who's suddenly like dying. So they started talking about transplant at that point. And I was not a fan of the idea. Because, at 20, you're like, oh, I'll be fine. I'm invincible. Like, you may not realize that's what you think when you're young, but you do. You're like, I'm not going to die. I'll be okay. And so they said, okay, we'll table that idea for another few days. I got some high dose steroids. Jay, I'm sure you've had your rounds with those.
Oh yeah, I know all about it. I know all about. I'm walking right with you on this one. I know how. Yep, I know.
So I'm like up all night on these steroids just because you can't sleep and you're like jittery, but you're tired and frustrated and very emotional. And then they said, okay, look, the steroids are not helping your liver function. So we're going to do a biopsy and we'll see what's going on from there. So at the time, I had gained so much fluid weight in my abdomen that they didn't feel safe doing a regular biopsy. So they went down my jugular vein, which is a transjugular biopsy, which at the time I was terrifying, but now it sounds really cool. I'm like, oh, they just went down my jugular vein. And the results of that is the first time I think I realized my own mortality. Because your liver, your biggest organ, 3 pounds, mine was the size of a fist. It was just completely gone. And they checked on the cell structure, like when they look at it under the microscope, and they said the cell structure had completely collapsed. There was no hope of it regenerating. No one had an answer for why they couldn't do research on it because it was so bad. And so we were all just like, well, she's going to need a transplant to live. And I was like, I guess I am. So they told me I might live a week if I didn't get a transplant.
Wow. So what was this time frame? So you went home, your mom was like, you don't look so great.
Yep.
Go to the doctor, till the point where you had this biopsy and they're like, you need a transplant like yesterday. What was this time frame for you?
6 weeks.
Oh,
wow. Geez. Okay.
Yeah.
That all happened
6
really
weeks
to try to.
Oh yeah.
I can't imagine being 20 years old and needing a transplant, let alone so quickly trying to wrap your head around that. Were your
I didn't.
Or anybody able to? Was anybody able to get down to New Orleans, since that's not where you even lived? Were they there with you? What kind of support system did you have?
Yeah, I had a really good support system. So everything in that time is so like fuzzy because I was just like, I felt like I was just being shipped all over the South to different doctors. But there was always a parent with me, is what I remember. One of my parents is with me. I have a younger sister. The other one was like trying to make sure she was okay, and they would come later. So from my home in Mississippi to New Orleans is only about a 2-hour drive.
Okay.
So they were able to like swing home for the weekend. Aunts and uncles would come and stay. Grandparents would come and stay. But my parents never left once I got there. Awesome. So I had a really, really good support system, which I know everyone's not so lucky to have.
That's great.
Okay, so now I'm getting anxious. So you have like they're telling you got like a week before things are gonna get really drastic. You're not maybe gonna make it that week. So they list you, and obviously I'm assuming that you're in the ICU. The doctors kind of know that's where you're going. So I'm assuming like they're already doing the testing. They're already, doing the transplant evaluation at that time, right? So were you listed that day?
So the day that we decided I would only live a week, I got listed and also moved out of ICU because I just had too much energy for ICU. So they put me on the transplant floor, which is
Okay.
where they have like pre-op patients and post-op patients,
Yeah.
which made way more sense because I was kind of disturbing all the people who were like intubated and like severe. And that way I could just roam around and be obnoxious on a floor where people were more energetic. So they moved me to a transplant floor and listed me. And I'm like, I don't know the odds of getting a transplant in a week. I don't know if this is like my last week on this planet. I don't know. I mean, I had no idea.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure. That I can't imagine the pressure that someone tells you have 7 days, you know,
Yeah.
and then like you said, you're already unfamiliar with, you're already still in shock from what's going on, obviously, and I just wonder how was your medical team during this time? Like, were they keeping you informed, or were you kind of not really in the loop as to what was going on behind the scenes, or what was really going? What was that like?
I think that they kept me as informed as they thought they should.
Mhm.
Um, because 20 is kind of close to 18. I think a lot of times that and my level of just like vibrancy kind of made them talk around me to my parents. Like
Okay.
maybe I couldn't handle it. And so even though I was not a minor, I felt like some critical information kind of got passed over me um, and processed with my parents before it came to me. So I processed, like my parents told me everything in their own way, but I felt like sometimes the team didn't always fully explain things to me. The doctors did that great, but the nurses are, kind of endeared to you, and they're the ones who have to put up with your attitude. So it just kind of felt like, honestly, like I just couldn't keep up. I was getting more exhausted. I was getting more aware that like, oh, this is really happening. Um, what I would now say, like, now that I have a grasp on more mental wellness, like, would be just like right in the middle of like headed towards PTSD. Like we're in this like trauma bubble. My whole family going through it in different ways, and we're all in survival mode.
Mhm.
Um, and there's no fight or flight. It's just fight because there's nowhere to, you know, flight to.
Right. You're stuck. This is what's happening.
just
Oh my God.
just stuck there. Yeah.
So how many days after transplant day did you get the call?
So the day after, my surgeon came in and told me they had found a match and he had gone to look at it and it wasn't good enough.
Okay.
And that's the first time I remember being like pretty pissed off. I was
Mhm.
like, you just told me I'm going to live a week if I don't get a transplant. And you just told me, oh, that's a match and it was okay. But like, I passed on it. So I'm like, I'm going to die because he passed on a liver. And he looked at me very seriously. I remember the conversation well. And he said, Brooke, you're young, you're otherwise healthy, and I want you to have the best. He said, that was a TJ Maxx liver, and I want you to have a Macy's liver. And
Yeah.
I said, okay, I get that, but you also told me I only have a week to live.
Yeah.
So that was the day after I got listed, and 3 days later, he found what he would call the Macy's liver. So I was listed on June 21st and transplanted on June 24th,
Awesome. That
all while
had
I
to
was in the
be
Race
hospital.
against time, right?
right.
Yeah.
How were you feeling that day? Were you starting to really see a decline in your energy level and your health by that point, or were you still pretty energetic and as much like
I
yourself
mean,
as you could be at that point?
I was, I don't know how accurately I remember all of it. So my parents and I are kind of rehashing this right now, and my sister, as I'm blogging it right now, and my husband and we have a podcast, and so we're kind of retelling the story right now.
Yeah.
So a lot of this is coming up again. I just remember like I was tired and I think part of that was because my liver was doing bad, but I think part of that was me not knowing how to deal with all that was coming at me. Like my coping mechanism was, I'm just going to go to sleep. So
Sounds
I
great.
didn't, I got tired of people visiting me. I got tired of like feeling like I had to put on a show for whoever came and stayed and, prayed for me or said stupid things to me that I had to like correct. I grew up in a Bible Belt, and a lot of people with really good intentions said things to me that were not accurate. And I really learned to find my voice during that time, because no, it was not a sin I committed that caused my liver to fail, nor my parents' sin. Um, and I was like, you can go. Like, I don't have the energy for that and sustaining my own life right now. But thanks for coming.
I'm sorry that happened to you. I imagine that sucks a lot of energy out of you too.
It does.
Right?
It does.
It's just really
I thought I was an introvert, and maybe I was at that point. But I've learned to guard my boundaries a lot more because I need to protect my energy. And so, we just had kind of a constant rotating door of people who cared about me, which is amazing. Like a lot of people don't have that. But I finally, like during that week, was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, just my parents, even some family I couldn't do. I was like, it's too much.
Did you hear and I'm just guessing here, but being that you were only 20 at the time, you probably heard a lot of comments like, wow, you're so young, right? Did you hear a lot of that? So young for this to be happening to, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and anytime it's your liver, they think you're an alcoholic or a drug user. Yeah. So little miss me, I was at Christian college, like innocent baby. And everyone's like, what did you do? This is horrible. And I was like, I didn't do anything.
That's part of the misconception that goes along with these things, right?
Yeah.
The liver thing, like you said, I've heard the same thing. You must be a heavy drinker. You must be, like, no.
Nope. Nope, that's not how it works.
Nope.
Yeah. So transplant day. I was having my nighttime snack of choice in the hospital is chocolate ice cream with graham crackers. To this day, that's still what I want.
Nice.
Because it's something the nurses always have in the fridge and I don't have to call dietary and get it. So I had just called them for mine and my nurse came in with nothing in her hands and I was like, where's my snack?
Got something.
Oh, where's my snack? And she was like, I have something better. And I was like, where's my snack? She said, you can't eat because you're having a transplant. And I was like, shut up. So I got prepped that night. Like I was like, I don't know. I feel like it was the middle of the night. It may have been early morning, but I felt like they were up all night doing stuff to me to get me ready for surgery. And I went into surgery and it took forever, according to my family. And the only time I remember being afraid, like to this point, was I woke up and they said, hey, Brooke, surgery went well. We're going to put you back under now. And I was like, because, imagine being intubated. So you can't talk. You've got a breathing tube down your throat. And you're like waking up and you're kind of in this like dreamlike state. And you're like not quite sure what reality feels like in that moment. But they said, your liver numbers aren't coming down fast enough. So we want to make sure that everything is connected really well. Like we're going to go back in and basically check the connections. Like when you get under the hood of a car and start checking and make sure everything's working. And that's the moment I remember feeling like it didn't work. Like this is it. And so they put me back under. Several more hours of surgery later, they had connected everything. It just took me longer to reboot, I guess. And then I came out in ICU.
Wow. So that really was a lot, that definitely I'm sure felt like forever for your family, because I'm sure they expected a lot shorter. And then this, complication that doesn't sound like it was really a complication, but I'm so glad they were able to go back in and check and were so thorough and making sure that you were okay. What was that immediate recovery period like for you? Like a few days after surgery?
I would say hell on earth. And I've talked to a lot of recipients, and everybody's had a different experience, which I'm sure you guys, as you're interviewing, are seeing that more and more. Because I was so healthy up until my transplant, I didn't decline over a long period of time. Like a lot of transplant recipients' responses, I immediately felt better. Like even though I was still in the bed, it's like my body was working and I could tell it was different. I woke up and I still had the breathing tube in for like 15 more hours. And so I felt panicky and anxious because I couldn't communicate. And, tubes coming out anywhere you can imagine a tube coming out, catheter and IVs all over and drains, like all these things that I didn't, because it was so fast, I didn't even have time to like prepare for. So I just felt like whose body is this? It doesn't belong to me. And then the day after surgery, my back hurt so bad. And when I finally looked in the mirror, it was just bruised. And so I had to learn about like how the surgery worked, because I would like all the information. I'm one of those people who I need to know. Like I got on the internet and watched a whole transplant. Like I need to see it from beginning to end. Like, so I was like, oh, I see why my back hurts, because those muscles got stretched and moved around. And when they told me to get up and walk the day after, I was like, honey, Jesus didn't even get up and walk until 3 days later. So I'm not about to get up and walk. And like everybody else I talked to, it felt like, oh, we're better. Like we feel better. We're glad we can walk. It's hard, yes, and I felt like my life is over. Like what person's going to want to be friends with or date or marry a 20-year-old who has to take, 60 pills a day and constantly take temperature and blood pressure and can barely walk at a normal human pace and looks like she is a pregnant drug addict because her belly's so big and she's got bruises all over her body. Like that's the real vanity of being 20, the luxury of that. Like that's the real thoughts that went through my head at that time. Like, no one's going to want to be with me. My life is not ever going to be the same like they promised. Like this is not, they may be extending my life, but it's not going to be good. It's not going to be fun. What have I done to myself?
Oh,
that's a reality.
That's really a reality. And then so on this road to recovery, because I'm still here right with you. I know how they tell you to walk, and you're like, that's probably one of the hardest parts, right? Just getting up out of the bed at first, right? And then putting that first foot down I know what I totally I get that feeling. I'm just reliving it right now. How long were you in the hospital after your transplant?
I feel like it was only a few weeks, and I'm terrible at notes. So we'll say a few weeks, but then also the transplant center had a hotel connected to it. So my family and I stayed there for at least a month. And I would wheelchair or walk or kind of a little of each over every morning for labs at the like outpatient clinic. But we were like, that was part of the process. So it was like, you have a little bit of freedom, but not a lot of freedom.
Yeah. You get some freedoms. Like not having to be bugged by nurses every 2 hours.
Yeah.
But
But also, who's going to bring me my chocolate ice cream at night?
I was just going to say, the parents had to go get chocolate ice cream and graham crackers to bring you every night in the hotel, right?
They did
The
not
little
do that.
things. You probably appreciated that more then, though, right? Probably
I really
appreciate a
did.
lot more then because you're like, okay, they
Yeah.
don't have to, at that point, it's like they don't have to touch me anymore. They don't have to, I don't have to cut up. I have to lay in this bed. I mean, to me, that, like I said, that's just the worst part. 15 hours with a tube down your throat. Everything's going on around you. And you're like, I can't communicate my wants, needs, or desires. And, tubes are everywhere. That's the
That was the
hardest
worst.
part. That's the hardest part. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
How long were you having to do daily labs for after transplant?
It seemed like it was around a month.
Okay.
May have been more. And then because we only lived 2-ish hours away, I went home and went to like twice a week labs.
Okay.
And then had like regular checkups in New Orleans. And man, in the middle of all that recovery, it just feels like it's hard for me to imagine now as a wife and a mom with 2 kids, like, because I know people are going through a transplant and waiting farther along in their life. And that's a potential reality for me down the road, is that I'll need another transplant. But I'm like, I was just like a single kid. My parents had to drop everything, but I could like postpone school. I didn't have to worry about the money. I really didn't have any other worry except my health. And so it was like, who's going to drive me to the lab today? Can we drive through McDonald's? Like, so I just like got to take care of myself. And I'd never had a time where I just took care of myself. And like, it was really hard for me because I'm very ambitious. I was studying vocal performance in college. And so I'm like halfway through a singing degree. And then I have a surgery where they cut through all of my abdominal wall. And so I've got to rebuild all that muscle, relearn how to sing again before I can finish my degree. And I had to decide, is it worth it? Is this something I really want to pursue? It feels like it takes over your life. Like, I don't know if you felt like that, Jay. Like the medicine schedule, when
Very
they're
much
telling
so.
you like what to take when you get out of
Yeah.
the hospital, and you're like, how am I going to do this without like killing myself on accident?
Yeah. You do feel like, I was fortunate because I had a medical team that really checked in on me constantly, but yeah, it does feel overwhelming. All these pills, and for me, it was a lifestyle change that went with it as far as diet and everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't feel like, where am I gonna get the time to do everything and still enjoy life, right? Still
Yeah.
be able to enjoy a normal, go back to normalcy a little bit after that. So.
Yeah.
Well, did you have any reaction? How was your reaction to the anti-rejection medications?
All my food tasted like metal.
Mm.
I still have really bad tremors.
Okay.
So my fine motor skills are just like not existent. Everyone picks on me and my family, my kids, my parents. Migraines. I've had migraines since my transplant. And I've been on steroids long term. So almost the entire transplant, which they said is because of my autoimmune issue. It's like anytime I come off steroids, my liver does not like it. And so just with that, knowing that I'm going to have bone loss over time, and it's hard on my kidneys, but so far my kidneys are hanging in there.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
How long would you say it was before you were able to develop that balance of, yes, like my health needs to be, important, and it is important, but I'm a young woman and I want to live my life and enjoy it. Like, when were you finally able to kind of find that balance?
Haven't done it yet.
Okay.
I'm 36. I would say it's really it's like the rest of life. There's kind of a season you'll go through where you're like, oh, I feel really balanced and good. And then something will come up and it takes more energy and time away from what you're focusing on. And you go, okay, I need to focus on my mental health right now. Okay, I got to focus on my kids right now. For me in college, like the first step to being balanced was I started practicing yoga. I got certified to be a yoga instructor so I could help other people because I was like, this is transformational. Like, I never moved my body like this, and it actually makes me feel good. Um, and I had to change my perspective about what normal was for a college student. So, where my friends could go study all night or party all night, I mean, I needed to go to bed.
Right.
I had to learn how to say no. I don't know that I'd ever had to say no to anything. I had energy, anything I put my mind to, I just did it. And so learning the word no at 20 has been the biggest gift I've received. Um, and people often say, how do you have such good boundaries at such a young age? I'm like, because I learned to say no so young. Like, my health is more important than making you happy in this moment. And my health is more important than like overdoing it and being in bed for 3 days.
Yeah.
So
Everything's
that was like, go ahead, Jay.
no, I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. I was just saying everything's more measured now.
Yes.
You have to measure what's worth that extra. This, if I stay up to 3 a.m, I'm gonna pay for it, and what just a life balance. It's a better life balance. So
Yeah, it is. And then after college, I went into teaching music for a few years. But I lived at home with my parents. And during that time, I was able to like pay off student loans, learn kind of how to teach and manage a career, and like dating as an adult. And then still realizing like, oh, I still have to be able to say no. I still have to choose to like turn my brain off and rest from my job, because I'm a perfectionist, and I'm like any extra second that I had energy, I was like, I want to get better at teaching. I want to make this the best thing. And then my husband, who I met in college, he's from Washington State, which is where we live now. When we got married, it was the same thing. It's the new balance of now there's another person to consider all the time. I realized I'm not as extroverted as I thought when there was always a person in my space.
Yeah.
And that I needed to like be able to advocate for like, time to read and reflect and do the things that like nourish me. And I've had kind of a weird, I don't know if it's weird to everybody, but it feels weird to me from people I've talked to. I've had a very roller coastery health journey for the past 16 years. So it's awesome that my liver is hanging in there and doing fine. But whatever autoimmune issue I had that we could never figure out that caused my liver to fail, I've had several episodes of rejection over the years where I've been hospitalized, had high dose steroids, ended up, adding a different medicine here and there, changing a medicine. And I know all that's like part for the course with transplant. But I've, in the past probably 5 years, just declined overall in my health. And it's been kind of a blessing and a curse. I stopped working a traditional job last year when COVID started. My position was no longer available, and I needed to be home for my safety. So I was at home, and it was the first time that like there was nothing for me to try to be perfect at, to strive for, and I could actually be in tune with my body and realize like I'm more tired than I thought I was. Maybe I'm not as okay as I've been pushing myself to be, because I push. I'm kind of just go, go, go. And over the past year, I have learned that I need to slow down a lot, that I need more support to do things, that everything doesn't have to be perfect. My house doesn't have to be perfect. I don't have to cook every meal. I mean, my husband cooks most of the meals anyway. But like my ideas of perfection have changed. And now it's just so much more about like enjoying my family and my kids and the people I love, which is after my transplant how I felt, like with such gratitude for my life and my second chance at life. And somewhere along the way, I got busy and felt normal enough to forget that gratitude. And I've really come back to that just to say, like, man, we have a good life here. Our kids are amazing. You know, we're all okay. We're surviving a pandemic.
Yeah.
Like, I never thought that would be on my list of things I'd accomplished in my lifetime. And, um, you know, now we're fully vaccinated in our house. So just really, really cool things happening over here.
That's great. So when you said you met your husband in college, was this
Yeah.
pre or post transplant?
Okay, so I met him 6 months before I got sick. Well, we dated for 6 months before I got sick.
Okay.
And I had just broken up with him right before I got really sick because I had goals and he was keeping me from them. That's what he says that I said. He said it wasn't very nice. I said, oh, I wasn't very nice then. And so we were friends during my transplant, all that stuff. Like, this was the year that Facebook came out, for
Okay.
reference. Okay. So, but you had to have a .edu email address
Yeah.
to have it. So I didn't have one yet. And if I did, I would have been too tired to use it anyway. My mom had a flip phone, and they didn't have Caring Bridge yet. They didn't have GoFundMe. Like all the things we use now, like especially in the medical community to kind of communicate, and social media, like we had none of those. So every day my mom would change the voicemail on her phone and call it the Brooke update and put the date. And so people could call and listen to the update for the day.
Wow.
And then
That's
hang up.
creative.
And yeah, my mom's very creative. And that's how people got their information, because there's just no other way for us to manage it.
Right.
So she did that for forever. I wish we could go back and like find a way to have those. I wish that would be so cool.
Yeah.
And so when Ben would call, my husband, I would actually answer. She said it's the only person I would answer the phone for. And so we would chat. He was trying to figure out how to fly out to New Orleans from Washington. And he said his mom was saying, didn't she just dump you? Like, why are you trying to fly out there for a girl that just dumped you? And my mom was like, why are you answering the phone for a boy you just broke up with? So we were friends for 6 years after that. And he lived in Washington and I lived in Mississippi. And then 6 years later, I came out and sang a gig with him for New Year's Eve. And we went on our first date the next day and got married 6 months later. So we dated for a year total, but 6 years apart. And then we got married.
That's quite a journey in itself.
It's pretty wild. Yeah.
Transplant.
Yeah. So he wasn't with me. Like you said, you weren't able to be with Jay during his transplant.
Right.
Ben wasn't at the hospital with me. He was on the phone, but it's not the same experience. And he's been in the hospital with me several times since then. Last January 2020, they were talking about me needing another liver sooner rather than later. And that's like off the table now. I don't know what changed, but like he's been through all the stuff as an adult. So it's crazy.
Do you think that
Transplant's a crazy world.
It's a great one. Do you think that the transplant affects your relationship at all?
All the time. All the time. I mentioned that we have a podcast and we are working on a series right now of couples where one person has chronic illness and the other has to do a lot more of a caregiver role. Mm-hmm. And we're interviewing them. Some are transplant, some are mental health, other things, because that's like kind of our constant topic of like, I don't know, maybe the most communication is required because we're still learning every day, like how it affects us, how to communicate about it. We have a 7-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son, and like how to communicate with them and how it affects them. It affects our finances, it affects our intimacy, it affects like our planning. So like, I mean, that's kind of hard. I tried to talk him out of marrying me more than once, because I just felt like I was a burden. I was like, I don't want to have a family because I don't want to put that pressure on someone else. Like, you think you know what you're getting into, but you don't know what you're getting into, is how I felt. And then when we adopted our kids, like I had a really serious conversation with him and it was like, do we really want to bring them into this? Like, is this, I mean, there's potential that like I could get sick and die and you're going to be a single dad. There's potential, like there's lots of things that could happen. He's like, that could happen to anyone. So he's a really good balance for me because I'm kind of the dark and twisty one and he's more of the like, we're going to be okay. It's, you know, he's not like totally in denial that things are what they are, but he's more of the like, he kind of calms me down, reins me back in.
That balance that is
That
great.
balance. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your kids. So you said that they were adopted.
They're awesome.
They're
They're
awesome.
the coolest kids.
Great.
Yeah.
Do they know about, what do they know about mom's transplant? I mean, you know, they're a little bit younger still.
Yeah. So let's see. We kind of talk about everything in our family. There's never been like a conversation where we sat down and said, hey guys, you're adopted, or like, hey, I had a transplant. It's just everything kind of comes up naturally. And as they ask questions, we answer them as age appropriately as we can. So, you know, I've been hospitalized while both kids have been alive. They've come to visit me in the hospital. I don't think they understand conceptually about the transplant. Like we always talk about mom has a boy liver and mom has boy parts. And my 4-year-old thinks that's hilarious. He's like really cracking up by that. And so they know that it affects their daily life probably more than they care what actually happened. So they're learning transplant to me means that when mommy has a migraine, she can't play with us. Or transplant to me means that sometimes other people are going to pick us up from school when mom was planning to. Or that our plans change last minute and that doesn't feel good and we're frustrated about it, but that's still how it's going to happen. Like, so I think what they're learning is it saved mommy's life and also it's hard.
Yeah.
And so like, you know, amidst COVID where they're not even really able to articulate like how earth-shattering it is to be home for a year. I think their first expression of like frustration about my transplant was this year while we were all home. And they were like, you're never well enough. One of them was like, you're never well enough to play with us. And it just like, felt like a stab to the heart because that's what I'm sensitive about. You know, I want to be present with them. And then separately, the other one, because he didn't hear his sister say something like that. He said something along the same lines in the same week. And it made me really think through like, okay, is that the biggest thing? Like, are they they're hurting too? Like that's what they're telling me is that it hurts. They want to be with me and I can't give them what they need all the time. So we try to talk openly and honestly about what's going on. And I hope that they become more empathetic and compassionate humans because of it. Because when other people are hurting, I already see them care more than I see the average kid. Because I don't push through pain well anymore. I mean, I'm sure I operate at a higher pain tolerance than most people. But when I'm down, I'm down.
Yeah.
And I just got to be down until I can get back up again. And mental health is a big part of that for me. And a big thing that I advocate for talking about is a lot of people don't realize post-transplant how much you need to take care of your mental health and how much of a toll it takes on you. And And doctors do their part medically, and nurses do their part, and the social worker does their part. But like therapy is like top of my list when I talk to people who are waiting. I'm like, get it on the list. Talk to somebody before if you can, if you've got the time. Talk to someone after, and continue to talk to someone, because you need a place where you can vent all your frustrations without worrying how it's going to affect your family. And in my case, I had to walk through trauma and PTSD because my body was telling me I was healthy. I felt fine.
Yeah.
And my blood results said otherwise. So I am in a constant battle with trusting my body that I've been working through for 16 years. Oh, are you lying to me, body? Are you going to be nice and tell me the truth? Or I'll feel bad and I'll go get my labs done because I'm like, oh, something's got to be up. Labs are perfect. And I'm like in bed for 3 days. So mental health is super important. And I think we got to normalize talking about how hard it is in our head and our body and our heart.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I just have a few more questions. I don't know if you're going to have any more. But one of them is, what do you think is the biggest challenge through this whole 16-year journey? If you look back at it and it's just like, this is the hardest, most challenging part for me, what would you say that is?
I don't know. That's tough. Does everyone else have a really good answer that they just come up with off the top of their head?
I think everybody has different challenges, so it comes up in different ways.
Yeah, I think that like being so close to my own mortality all the time is hard. Because when your body's working pretty normally, so you're like just an average person with like good health, you don't think every day about your mortality.
Right.
And that's something I think about a lot and talk about in therapy a lot. Like, every time I cough, I'm like, oh, is this it? And so I think, over 16 years, like learning like, okay, you can get a cold, Brooke, you're going to be okay. Like everything is not death, and maybe just I feel like for a long time I was very good at putting on a show and being like the face of transplant, like let me tell you how great it is. And it's a lot harder to be authentic and share your pain and your struggles. And I've kind of worked my way up to that over 16 years, but I'm finding that that's been more helpful to people than like someone who's been through it and can quote all the statistics to you, to be able to say, yeah, that sucks, and I've been there, or I can walk next to you down that road. That's a hard one, because it would be great if transplant fixed everything and you never thought about it again. You break your arm, you get a cast, you heal up. You get a cold, you get better, you heal up. Like that'd be great if that's how transplant worked, but it's not. It's a lifelong journey. And then you become aware of the gift it is, and you become aware of the need for organs. And it's like, oh, how do I not speak out? How do I not help other people understand that they need to be organ donors? Like this is too important not to keep quiet about.
Absolutely. So then my reverse question to that is, what do you think has been the biggest gift? What's the best part of transplant for you?
I kind of imagine who I would have become had I not had a transplant, and the trajectory that I was on. Like you heard me tell you that I broke up with my husband because, he was in the way of my goals. Like that's kind of the drivenness that I had at 20 when we were dating. And I thought I was nice and empathetic and kind. And I don't think I really even realized like how unaware I was of other people or bigger things going on in the world. And it's like now when I see others hurt, I feel like I hurt with them. I care more, not just in the transplant world, I care more about loving people and caring about people than like a policy or a political party or making someone happy that I fit into a certain box. You know, I grew up in a very racist part of the country, and, you know, just to be able to like empathize now with my Black friends that I grew up with, like, and own the part of it where I was like complicit in my bias and didn't even know. And just to say, like, I wouldn't have been that person, I don't think, had I not had my transplant. It's one of those weird, like, what a weird journey to get where I've been. Um, but I like who I'm becoming. And I don't know if I could have said that if I would have taken 20-year-old me transplant out of it and then walked a parallel life. I don't know if I would have liked who I'd become. I don't know. You know, I can only speculate.
Yeah.
But she was kind of heading down a rough road.
Yeah. That's great. And then I kind of alluded to it earlier when we were talking, but one of the questions that I love to ask everybody is, what is the biggest misconception that you can debunk for us about transplant and donation today?
Man, there's so many.
I know, right?
And I love debunking. So, biggest one. Well, I don't know. That signing up and putting it on your driver's license is enough. I mean, I think that's probably the biggest thing. Like, if you're watching this episode and you're still with us after all of my talking, you know, it's great to sign up and register to be a donor, but make sure your family knows your wishes. Like, it's so important that once you die, your family knows why you want to be a donor, and that you want to be a donor, because they're the ones who ultimately still get to make the decision in the US, and that's just how it is right now. And that's an important myth to debunk for me, because a lot of people have a heart on their driver's license, but that doesn't always mean they're able to donate.
Absolutely. That's a great one. Thanks for that. And I don't know if you're going to have any other questions, but my last question for you is, if there is somebody out there, a 20-year-old, somebody who feels okay, somebody who was in your shoes 16 years ago, who just found out they need a transplant, what would you like to tell them?
Hang in there. Lean on your support system. You're going to make it. It's okay to say no and to rest and to breathe. It's okay to listen to your body. It's okay to be afraid and to feel all the feelings you have. There's space enough to feel the joy and the hard and the good and the bad all at the same time. And that first walk sucks, but it leads to a lot more really good walks.
Awesome. Jay, do you have anything else for Brooke today?
No, I just, you know, like I said, reliving your stories, we have a lot of parallels. So, you know, I just really, I'm glad that, like you said, it's made you a better person. And I can attest to that as well, you know. And this is something that's really hard to explain, but, you know, you do have more empathy and compassion for someone else. And like you said, it goes beyond just the transplant realm. So it's just, you know, it's just really been a pleasure having you relay your story, and also that you're also advocating in your own way with the blog, and you and your husband, and, you know, all these things are just excellent. And I just love to hear. And that's, you know, really, I just love to hear. I'm loving this, to hear your story, and you know, just like you said, coming to terms with who you are and being able to reflect has just been something for me that's really hit home. So I just appreciate you coming on.
Thank you guys for thinking of me. It's awesome. I love what you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, I'm Laura.
I'm Jay.
And Brooke, thank you so much for being with us today. And I hope you will join us next time on Lifers TLC. Bye. Thanks for joining us today.
Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss our next guest.
We need your help to spread support and awareness for organ transplant donation.
Please share this video and channel with your friends.
Tell someone something that you learned or heard from today's guest.
Get in touch with us if you'd like to join us as a guest.
See you next time.
Peace.